Nobody was supposed to know what happened that afternoon in Windsor. The palace staff had been told to stay quiet. The incident report was filed under a routine code. And the one man who had broken every rule that day, the one who had stepped far beyond the line he was trained never to cross, was asked, very politely, to say nothing. But people talk, and sometimes the truth finds its way out anyway. It was a Tuesday in late October. The sky over Windsor Great Park was the color of ash, the kind of cold that settles into your coat and doesn't leave. Princess Charlotte was 7 years old that day, small for her age, with her mother's steady eyes and her father's quiet stubbornness. She had been allowed a rare, free afternoon. No schedule, no camera crews, no formal obligations, just the grounds, and her nanny, and the rotating team of protection officers assigned to her detail. Catherine was not there. She had a full day of engagements in London, 2 hospital visits, a school opening, and a late briefing at Kensington Palace. Her absence from Windsor that afternoon was planned, cleared, and recorded, and that's exactly what made what happened next so dangerous. The nanny's name was Mrs. Elaine Hartley. Warm woman, efficient. She had worked with royal children before and understood the unwritten rules better than most. She kept Charlotte close to the path that wound through the eastern edge of the park, well within the safe perimeter, well within sight of the officers posted at the outer markers. If you're new here and stories like this move you, real, raw human moments that most people never hear about, consider subscribing. There's more where this came from. At approximately 2:15 in the afternoon, Charlotte stopped walking. She had spotted something near the tree line. A dog, small brown, limping, slightly nosing through the fallen leaves, about 30 meters off the path. Charlotte loved animals. Everyone who knew her knew that. She turned to Mrs. Hartley and asked, in that careful, polite way of hers, if she could go look. Mrs. Hartley said yes. She should not have, but she said yes. What neither of them noticed was that the protection officer who normally covered that quadrant had shifted position 10 minutes earlier. A radio call, a minor perimeter adjustment, routine. The gap in coverage was small, less than 90 seconds in a normal scenario. Barely worth noting, but Charlotte moved quickly when she wanted to. By the time Mrs. Hartley looked up from her phone, Charlotte had crossed the 30 meters and was crouching beside the dog. Her red coat, a bright spot, against the gray and brown of the tree line. And then a second figure emerged from between the trees. A man, on foot, moving with purpose. He was not wearing a uniform. He was not part of the team. He had no visible identification. He was inside the perimeter, walking directly toward Princess Charlotte. And not a single alarm had been raised. Except one. Officer James Mercer was not assigned to Charlotte's quadrant. That afternoon, he was posted 80 meters to the south, watching a service gate. He should have stayed there. Protocol required it. His orders were clear, but he had seen the man come through the trees, and in that single frozen second before the radio crackled, before anyone else reacted, James Mercer made a decision that would change everything. He moved. Asterisk, asterisk, James Mercer had been a protection officer for 11 years. He had worked close protection in 3 countries. He had stood guard at state funerals and royal weddings. He had been trained, drilled, tested, examined to do one thing above all others: follow the plan. The plan kept everyone safe. Deviation created chaos. Every senior officer who had ever briefed him had said the same thing. Stay in your position. Trust the system. Do not react on instinct alone. But instinct was exactly what hit him. When he saw that man step out of the trees, it wasn't the way the man was dressed. Dark jacket, work boots, nothing unusual. It wasn't his age, mid-40s, broad through the shoulders, unremarkable. It was the way he moved, purposeful, unhesitating, as if he already knew exactly where he was going, and he was going toward Charlotte. Mercer didn't call it in first. That was the first thing he did wrong, according to the report that came later. He should have radioed before moving. He should have alerted the team leader, held his position, and waited for direction instead. He was already running. He crossed the 80 meters of open ground faster than he had moved in years. The cold air hit his face. His boots found the soft earth at the edge of the path. He could see Charlotte crouching near the base of a large oak, both hands reaching toward the stray dog. She had no idea. She was completely absorbed, the way only children can be in this small, injured animal in front of her. The man was 15 meters from her. Then 10 not Mercer reached him at 8. He didn't tackle him. He didn't draw. He stepped directly into the man's path and stopped, putting his body between the stranger and the princess, and said 3 words in a voice that was quiet and absolute. "Stop right there." The man blinked. Startled, he looked at Mercer the way people look at something they didn't expect, a little confused, a little frightened. He raised both hands instinctively, palms out. "I'm just the dog," the man said. "It's my dog." He got out through the fence. "I've been looking for him for an hour." Charlotte looked up then. She had heard the voice. She saw the man. She saw Mercer. Her expression didn't show fear. It showed the careful, watchful stillness of a child who has been raised around security her whole life and knows when something is not ordinary. She stayed still. She did not run. She did not speak good girl, Mercer thought. By now, his radio was already crackling. The team leader's voice, sharp, controlled. Mercer's position had been noted. The deviation flagged. 2 other officers were already converging on the location. The man with the raised hands was shaking slightly. Not with aggression, with nerves. In his jacket pocket, when they checked, because they always check, was a dog lead. A worn leather one with a brass clasp, engraved with a small letter B, and on the dog's matted collar. When Mrs. Hartley finally coaxed the animal still enough to read it, the name, Bruno, and a phone number. The number matched the man. He was nobody dangerous. He was a groundskeeper who lived in the village 2 miles east of the park. Bruno had gotten through a gap in the old perimeter fence that no one had flagged in the maintenance report. The threat level dropped to 0 within 4 minutes, but the damage, if you could call it that, had already been done, because Mercer had left his post. And in the world he worked in, that was not a small thing. Asterisk, asterisk, the debrief took place the following morning. A small room at the back of the operations building. Gray walls. A table. 3 chairs. Mercer sat on one side. His team leader, Commander Hugh Rees, sat on the other with a senior protection coordinator beside him. A woman named Diane Forsyth, who had been in Royal Security for 22 years and whose face gave away nothing. Mercer had not slept, not because he was afraid of the meeting. He had faced harder rooms, but because he kept replaying the moment, the exact moment he had decided to move, and asking himself the question that had been sitting in his chest since the afternoon before. Had he been right? Or had he simply panicked? Commander Rees opened with the facts. Mercer had abandoned his assigned post. He had left a service gate unwatched for over 3 minutes. He had engaged an unidentified individual without radio confirmation. He had broken the chain of command in a live situation. Each point landed flat and clear, like stones dropping into still water. Mercer didn't argue. He sat straight. He answered yes to each question. Yes, he had done those things. Yes, he understood why they were considered violations. Yes, he would accept whatever review came next. Diane Forsyth had been watching him the whole time. Saying nothing when Rees finished, she finally spoke. "Before we go further," she said, "I want you to walk me through what you saw. Exactly from the moment you first noticed the individual." So Mercer did. He described the man's trajectory, the angle of approach, the speed, the fact that no one else in the quadrant had reacted, the fact that Charlotte was crouched and stationary and completely visible from the tree line, a position she should never have been allowed to reach in the first place. He said that last part carefully, not as an accusation, just as a fact. Forsyth made a note. Then she asked if you had followed protocol. If you had radioed first and waited, what is your honest assessment of the timeline? Mercer thought about it, honestly, without making himself the hero of the answer. Radio contact, 15 to 20 seconds minimum to reach the team leader. Direction and confirmation, another 10 to 15. Officers already posted would begin moving around the 30-second mark. At the rate the individual was approaching, he paused. He would have reached Charlotte before any officer got there. Silence. Reese shifted in his seat. Forsyth put down her pen. The individual turned out to be harmless, she said. Yes, Mercer said. But you didn't know that? No, he said. I didn't. She looked at him for a long moment. The kind of look that goes past the surface, past the report and the protocol violations and the formal language. The kind of look that asks, who are you, really, when it matters? Then she closed her folder. We'll continue this review in 48 hours, she said. In the meantime, you're on administrative hold. You'll remain on site. Mercer nodded and stood. He was almost at the door when Forsyth spoke again. Mr. Mercer, he turned. Princess Charlotte has been informed, she said, that the dog's name was Bruno. She's asked whether it was taken to a shelter. A pause. I thought you might want to know that she also asked about the officer who helped her. He held that sentence for a moment, said nothing. Then he nodded once and walked out into the corridor, where the gray morning light came through a single narrow window at the end of the hall. He stood there for a while, alone, and breathed, ****. The 48 hours passed slowly. Mercer stayed on site as instructed. He ate in the staff canteen. He walked the perimeter in the mornings, not as a duty, just because it helped him think. The other officers were professional about it. No one asked questions. No one kept their distance, but the silence around the situation was its own kind of pressure. On the second evening, something unexpected happened. A message came through the internal system. Not from Commander Rees, not from Diane Forsyth. From a private secretary in the household, the kind of message that arrives without a sender's name. In careful, formal language that says very little and somehow means everything. It said that a member of the family wished to pass on a personal note of thanks to the officer involved in the Windsor Park incident. That was all. No details. No elaboration. Just that one sentence sitting in his inbox like a stone in an empty room. Mercer read it twice. Then he shut his laptop and sat in the dark for a while. He was not supposed to be moved by things like this. His training had prepared him for the practical, the threat assessment, the physical response, the operational review. It had not, he realized, prepared him for the quiet aftermath, for the strange weight of a moment that had passed without disaster, and the question of what it cost you anyway. His career was almost certainly going to change after this. He knew that. Even if the review cleared him, even if Forsyth's final judgment was that his instinct had been sound, the record would show what it showed. A deviation. An unauthorized move. The kind of footnote that follows you 11 years. 3 countries. Hundreds of hours standing still in cold corridors and open parks and marble hallways. Watching, waiting, never being the story. And then one afternoon, in 80 meters of gray October air, he had become the story. He wasn't sure yet whether that was something to regret. The second meeting convened the next morning. Forsyth was there, Rees was there. There was also a third person this time, a man Mercer didn't recognize, introduced only as a senior liaison from the household. Trim, quiet, the kind of man who sits in rooms like this frequently and finds them unremarkable. The review Forsyth opened had been thorough. She laid it out plainly. The perimeter gap had been confirmed. The service fence on the eastern side had an unregistered weak point that should have been caught in the last maintenance sweep. That was a structural failure, not Mercer's. The positioning adjustment that had left Charlotte's quadrant briefly uncovered was also flagged. A procedural error by a different officer, now under separate review, and Mercer's decision to move without radio. A confirmation his own violation had been assessed against the specific timeline of the event. The conclusion, Forsyth said, was that in this particular instance, the deviation had been operationally justified, not praised. Not celebrated, justified. The formal language of it made Mercer almost want to smile. Commander Rees then spoke. He was careful. He acknowledged that Mercer's instinct had been correct. He also made clear, gently but absolutely, that the protocol existed for reasons that went beyond any single incident. That a different situation with a different outcome could have made Mercer's unauthorized movement catastrophic. That the rule was the rule precisely because you never knew, in the moment, which situation you were in. Mercer understood. He said so. The household liaison said nothing the entire meeting. He simply watched as they rose to leave. He shook Mercer's hand once, firmly, and made brief eye contact. That was all. But as Mercer walked out, he noticed that the formal hold had already been lifted. His assignment roster had been updated, and his next posting beginning the following week was not a service gate. It was close protection. Primary detail. He stopped in the corridor and read the assignment twice. Then he put his phone in his pocket and kept walking. Asterisk, asterisk, 3 weeks later. James Mercer stood inside Kensington Palace for the first time. Not near it. Not outside the gates. Inside in the quiet high-ceilinged corridor of the private residential wing, where the floors were polished wood and the light came through tall windows in long pale rectangles. He had been briefed for 2 hours that morning. New team, new protocols, new faces to learn. His role in the close protection detail was specific and bounded. He was one of 6 officers covering a rotating schedule. Nothing dramatic. The real work of protection was never dramatic. It was attention, consistency, knowing when something was 1 degree off from normal. He had done it before. He was good at it, but this posting was different, and he knew it. On his 3rd day, he saw Charlotte. She was walking with her nanny through the corridor, a different nanny, a younger one, heading toward the family room at the end of the hall. She was wearing a navy school jumper. Her hair was pulled back. She was talking about something, gesturing with her hands. Mid-sentence, when she passed the spot where Mercer was standing, she didn't look at him. Children in that world learned early not to stare at the officers. The security presence was part of the architecture, as ordinary as the walls. You didn't look at the walls. Mercer kept his eyes forward, professional still. And then Charlotte stopped. She turned back, just slightly. And she looked at him, not with the unfocused glance of vague recognition, but with the deliberate look of someone who had been told something and was now checking it against reality. She said nothing. Her nanny made a gentle sound, a soft, prompt, and Charlotte turned back and kept walking. That was it. But that evening, through the household message system, a short note arrived in Mercer's inbox. It was from the private secretary again. Formal, careful language. It said that Charlotte had asked her nanny whether Bruno the dog had found a good home. The answer, tracked down through the household staff who had followed up discreetly, was yes. The groundskeeper had taken Bruno to a local vet, had the leg seen to, and brought him home. Bruno was recovering well. Charlotte, the note said, had seemed satisfied by this. And then at the very end, below the formal close, below the initials, was a single handwritten line, just 7 words. In a child's careful cursive, "Thank you for being there that day." Mercer read it once. He didn't read it again. He didn't need to. He folded the note and placed it in the inside pocket of his jacket. Against his chest, there were things in this work that no debrief captured, no incident report cataloged. The moments that lived in the space between the protocol and the person in the gap, between what the job required and what being human required. He had spent 11 years learning to live in that gap, to serve inside it without letting it affect him. That was the discipline of it. The craft, but sometimes the gap held something real, something that stayed with you in the weeks that followed. The Windsor Park incident faded into the background of institutional memory. The perimeter fence was repaired. The procedural errors were addressed. 2 officers received formal guidance. The file was closed. Life in the palace continued at its own steady, particular rhythm. Mercer stood his hours, learned the new team, watched the corridor, the doors, the light. He was good at being invisible. He had always been good at that, but sometimes, on a quiet morning, when the long pale light came through the tall windows and fell across the polished floor, he thought about an October afternoon, a red coat against gray trees, a small girl crouching beside an injured dog, and he thought, some moments choose you. You don't plan for them. You can't train for them. You just have to be the kind of person who moves when it matters. He had moved. That was enough. Months passed. Winter came to Kensington, the kind that settles in without announcement, turning the park outside the windows into something bare and silver. The royal calendar moved in its own orbit. Engagements, school terms, public appearances, private routines. Mercer moved through it all as he always had, steady, quiet, present. He had found his rhythm in the new role. The close protection detail was more demanding than a perimeter post. More movement, more variables, more judgment calls per hour. But it suited him. He was the kind of man who worked better when he had to think, not just stand. And the household, in its careful, understated way, had accepted him, not celebrated, not made a fuss. That was not how things worked in that world. But there was a difference between being tolerated and being trusted, and Mercer could feel the shift. The way information was shared with him a little more freely. The way senior staff made eye contact when they passed him in the corridor. Small things. Significant ones? It was on a Thursday in February that Catherine returned to Windsor for a family weekend. Mercer wasn't assigned to her direct detail. That was a separate team, tightly coordinated, but the whole household adjusted when she was present. The energy changed, not tense. Something more like attention. Like a room coming into focus. He saw her briefly in the morning, crossing the main hall with an aide, her attention already moving between 2 things at once. She had a quality he had noticed in very few people, the ability to be fully present and fully forward-thinking at the same time. It made her hard to read at a distance, but impossible to underestimate up close. She glanced at him as she passed. A brief, professional acknowledgement, and then she stopped. "Mr. Mercer," she said. He straightened slightly. "Ma'am." She looked at him, not long, not dramatically. Just the way someone looks at a person they have thought about from a distance and are now seeing clearly for the first time. "I understand you had a difficult few weeks in October," she said. Her voice was calm, direct, without performance. "The review was thorough, ma'am," he said. "I'm satisfied with how it concluded." A pause. Something passed through her expression, not quite a smile, but close. "Charlotte told me the dog's name was Bruno," she said. He hadn't expected that. He kept his face still. "Yes, ma'am. I believe that's right." She also told me she'd seen the officer who helped that day. in the corridor. She held his gaze for just a moment more. She said he looked like someone who always knew what to do. Mercer said nothing. There was nothing to say. Children notice more than we give them credit for, Catherine added quietly. Then she gave a small, precise nod, the kind that closes a conversation with grace, and moved on down the hall. The aide followed. The moment ended. Mercer stood in the corridor and let the silence settle back around him. He thought about what it meant to be seen by a child who didn't know your name, who only knew that you had been there, that when it counted, you had not looked away. That was the whole of it, really. Not the protocol review, not the posting upgrade, not the note in his jacket pocket. Just the fact that a small girl with her mother's steady eyes had looked at him in a corridor and thought, that's someone who knew what to do. He would never talk about this. Not to friends, not to family. The nature of the work was silence. And he had made peace with that a long time ago. But he carried it the way you carry the things that remind you why you became who you became. The things that don't fit on a report or a record or a formal review, that live somewhere deeper. In the part of you that chose this work not for recognition, but because some jobs need to be done by people who will do them right even when no one is watching. James Mercer smoothed the front of his jacket. He returned to his post. He kept watch. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in quiet acts of courage, the kind that never make headlines but change everything. And if you haven't already, subscribe. There are more stories like this one waiting to be told.